everybody. GPUs are political pawns, and hey, we might even be tracking them around the world. You're watching Techstrong. All right, everybody. As we said, GPUs are in the news again. And turns out that, well, they're political pawns, and we're using them to kind of set up trade agreements. And there was a whole series of things happening in the world, but we have an awesome lineup of folks to talk about all this, starting off with our czar of Silicon Valley, John Schwartz. How you doing, John?
I'm good. How are you, Mike?
I'm well. You're looking brighter than ever, man. I'm liking this whole
I'm trying to. I've been working on the lighting. The camera that Alan sent me is very nice. It's a work in progress.
All right. Well, at least, you don't look like you're
we all working.
So that's good.
We all are. The state of day.
We're all a work in progress.
There you go. All right. Well, speaking of a work in progress, and Ahola Ward is joining us from, are you still in Texas, or where are you today?
Austin, Texas. Yes. And we're getting our first triple digit day today. I'm not really mentally ready, but here we are.
Yeah. And also in Austin, correct, Robert?
That is correct.
Oh, nice.
Robert is.
Yeah, I have over the past week in Austin, I've learned more about 6.2 liter diesel engines and GPU export controls than I care to admit.
Sounds about right.
Well, we in the gang are always excited when we can bring our friends together who live in the same city and have never met before. So it happens more often than we care to understand or admit. But hey, it's the world we live in. And finally, I'm Mike Fizzard, and I'm here in New York as usual. And we're going to jump into this topic with John. John, it's kind of crazy out there. I looked at the entourage that went with the president to the Middle East, and it includes Jensen Huang and the folks from OpenAI, and they were handing out contracts and gifts like it was, well, candy. What's going on here? And has this just become the new norm, or GPUs being held hostage for trading and political,
like bargaining chip? Yeah, the Trump administration, I think, sees these chips as literally bargaining chips and giving them some sort of leverage over other countries in terms of relations with other countries. I think, was it you or someone here? We talked about this, that the tech beat has actually become like a politics beat. And in a sense, there were three things that happened in succession. And I'll go back to last week, where it starts with these federal lawmakers. There's one in the House and there's one in the Senate. And they're moving forward with these bills that would require AI chips to carry geo-tracking technology to keep these sensitive chips out of hostile hands. Namely, they're talking about China. So there was the Chip Security Act, which was sponsored or written by Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas. And he wants to keep hardware from, quote, falling into the hands of adversaries like communist China. And essentially, the government would give the Commerce Secretary authority to verify location of this hardware. So then we have that followed by this week's news that NVIDIA is going to ship more than 18,000 Blackwell chips to Saudi Arabia to help power this new data center project with a newly created wealth fund-owned AI startup called Humane, I believe. And who was there in Riyadh, but none others than Jensen Huang, to talk about AI and how it, like electricity and the internet, is essential infrastructure for every nation. So they have this project going on. So this project, or this deal, was announced as part of this White House trip to the Middle East. And in a sense, Saudi Arabia is trying to enhance its AI capacity and strengthen its cloud computing infrastructure through foreign investment. That deal happened, of course, a day after the Commerce Department officially rescinded the Biden administration's AI diffusion rule that would have placed caps on chip sales to most countries around the world effective May 15th. So in a sense, it is a political football, and the candy is being handed out to NVIDIA and OpenAI, among others. It's really hard to kind of keep your hands on, your grasp what's going on from one moment to the other. So I'll leave it at that. And I would not be surprised if we see even more actions taking place, especially as it kind of is this part of the strategy of the U.S. to maintain some sort of leadership, or even in our view, the country's view, with dominance over AI in its escalating war with China.
Uh, Robert, this troubles my free market soul because, basically the United States government is putting its finger on who can buy what, when, and where. Is this going to become the new normal? Because we could apply this to all kinds of tech.
Well, absolutely. When GPUs are outlawed, only outlaws will have GPUs. We've seen this, concerns about export controls, and it worked out so great with PGP, restricting encryption technology. You can't stop it. Also, I think it's a bit overblown the impact that these chips have. Look at, we just have to point at DeepSeek to get an example of being able to provide good enough AI technology on not the latest and greatest chips. I also think Senator Cotton should have taken a trip to Bentonville and talked to a large retailer there to see if they are okay with the GPUs that they're consuming phoning home. I don't think that they would be on board with that. And also, any technologist will tell you that canceling phone home technology is super easy over the network. I just don't see this getting out. The way to implement something like this, the scale of it is simply too big. And I just don't see this progressing. I think it's political theater because the Senate's trying to restrict it, but then we have the executive branch trying to do the other thing.
In a previous life, I used to cover the channel, and we had this area of the channel known as the gray market. This is that whole realm of middle people or middlemen or women who sell all this stuff to folks because of most of what you buy. You don't buy direct from any vendor. And a lot of the vendors turn, a blind eye to where a lot of their goods and services winds up. And that's how come suddenly chips are in China that went through Singapore and nobody, quote unquote, knows how they got there, but they damn well do know how they got there. So my question to you, John, is this going to upend the whole business model for a lot of these companies if we start tracking on a granular level every unit of something shipped?
It sounds like a logistical nightmare. You're right. This chain, which is complicated as it is, it's more complicated now than it's ever been. In terms of parts, where they're coming from. And then on top of everything else, we have the tariffs, right? Which is, I didn't mention, which is another political football involving tech to a great extent. So yes, Mike, I think it will be an aggravating, incredibly annoying problem. And I think we're already seeing that. I believe it was AMD and NVIDIA were performing write-offs in terms of tracking their chips through all these various permutations. I can't even imagine what's going to happen next. I mean, it's the unpredictability and as Robert points out, there's that seeming contradiction between the government, or at least the Senate and the House, trying to restrict the flow, or not trying to restrict, but trying to keep track of the flow while the White House is cutting deals with other countries. It's absolute chaos. And I think the tech industry, of course, I think they're delighted now because, in a sense, if you're one of the power brokers or one of the companies with the ear of the president or his administration, you are going to benefit. We're seeing that already.
Yeah. And this troubles me deeply on this level, right? So the president wakes up on the wrong side of the bed one morning and suddenly my access to AI chips is constrained for some reason because, he's trying to negotiate something else that impacts me as a company. I mean, how far can this go? I mean, it's one thing, I guess, at the country level, but do individual organizations are going to have to start thinking twice about, who's annoyed at them in DC?
I don't think this is going to go very far. I think it's deliciously naive to believe that the people that are actually making good use of these chips would be thwarted by these lackluster controls. It's easily, as Robert said, deactivated. This is something that I don't think is going to actually work. I think all it's going to do is anger people. I just don't get. It just shows us how little our legislators understand what's going on in tech. It just highlights for us.
That's always been the case, Anne, right? I mean, they fundamentally
watch any Senate hearing. Right. Watch any Senate hearing with any big tech CEO, and you're just like, oh my God, you don't get this. You don't get this. And so if this is the move, that just shows me they don't get it, because this is not going to achieve anything. Meanwhile, we're shipping 18,000 Blackwell chips to Saudi Arabia.
Woo. John, you know what interested me as well about all of this? It was who wasn't on this trip. You didn't see, Intel CEO. You didn't see a Broadcom CEO. There's a, Apple CEO is missing. What does that tell you?
Tells me a lot. I mean, but remember during the Biden administration, he was in Ohio with where the plant was going to be built with Pat Gelsinger. Remember when Pat Gelsinger was a guest during, I think, a State of the Union speech? He was acknowledged. Broadcom, no sites. AMD, none. Yes, Apple seems to be a little bit out of favor. They're having their own problems with the EU and perhaps with the Justice Department. So, Trump does this. He plays favorites. Maybe eventually we will see Apple in the good graces. I know we're going to talk about Apple later, and it's in Siri. But I mean, in terms of Apple, they got some major problems in terms of Apple intelligence. We can talk about that later. It's whoever talked to him last, whoever talked to Trump last. Maybe Jensen did, maybe Sam Altman did. They were front and center and got the rewards.
I think if I read the reports correctly, AMD got some candy out of this too, though. They got a small portion of this deal was allocated their way as well. So I'm not sure they were on the trip, but they got something out of it.
They weren't there, but yeah, they at least they came away with something. I always feel badly for Intel. It's just such a long, slow decline, and again, they're left on the outside.
Mm-hmm. Robert, what's your best advice to folks then about all this? Should I just ignore all this political machinations and carry on as normal, or is there something I should be worried about?
Well, it depends on what your goal is. I mean, if your goal is to maintain solid mental health, yes, ignore it all. If your goal is to make business decisions, then look, I do believe that access to chips is a bit overblown. Certainly, there are quite a few things that you can do with older chips. In fact, with my RTX 3080, I'm creating neural networks with, for image classification just fine, with my Lego brick sorter. It's not a problem. If you are trying to build a competitor to ChatGPT, okay, you're going to need a little bit more. But for most of the AI tasks that businesses are going to be working with, you're okay. You don't need to go and get the most expensive stuff. What you do need to do is get some outstanding experts that are going to focus on tuning that model for the hardware available to you. No amount of export control is going to change efficiency when it comes to software in creating models and tuning them. And, the mother of invention is necessity. That's why we saw DeepSeek. That's why we're seeing the acceleration of true open source models that are driving value. I think a lot of this stuff is political theater. And for mental health purposes and also for business decisions, I don't think it matters.
And
well said.
I got this one thing here. In my experience and looking back in history, every time you attempt to restrict something, you wind up seemingly creating increased illicit demand for it. So am I going to see GPU smugglers now? And,
absolutely. I knew people that were smuggling PGP binders. And, I used PGP in college. Yeah, I remember. That was the thing people did. And they were like, I'm going to tattoo it. And then they can't tell me I can travel with it. It's just, don't sweat the small stuff, right? And when you do, you make it a bigger thing. And by the way, we still don't know what chips DeepSeek was developed on. There were rumors that they had snuck in better AI chips. Mm-hmm. But that was never substantiated. There's no proof to suggest that DeepSeek required all that work required these amazing chipsets. So we're also, just sort of assuming this is a hardware race when really it's not that simple.
Mm-hmm. And I'm reminded of those days when, I was in college and the house would get robbed and the stereo would be gone. And now if you get robbed, the GPUs are going to be stolen, right?
Catalytic converter, GPUs. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, just the idea of restricting all this. If you think that this is a good idea, then just hang out with your average middle school students and ask them how they get access to vapes. I think if 12, 13, 14-year-olds can get access to that, we're not going to stop this. I do wish they would apply this technology, phone home technology, to prescription opiates. That I think would have had more positive impact to the country. But who knows? If they want to restrict GPUs, great.
And also,
the TikTok ban. Look how well that worked.
Yeah, I was going to say, given the ineptitude of the federal government, that these bills are probably not going to go anywhere against the lobbying of big tech, especially NVIDIA, which seems to have the ear of the administration and everyone else. I don't think it's ever going to transpire.
I will tell you one thing that will happen for sure, though. There'll be more GPU hoarding than ever. People are just going to go out and buy these things and shove them in a closet just in case, because nobody knows what's going on. And that's been going on for a while. A lot of these GPUs that organizations are buying, they're not actually using yet because they're like, well, we never know, but at least we get them while we got them. Hey,
well, I cannot wait for the inevitable Beanie Baby-like crash for GPUs. That will be wonderful.
Sure. Those are called AI accelerators, and they'll be available in a store near you in a minute.
I can't wait to run my old crappy games at the highest GPU settings. Can't wait.
All right.
Awesome.
All right. We're clearly not taking this too seriously, but folks, keep an eye out because, well, you never know when it'll happen. We'll be back in a minute. All right, folks, we're back and we're talking about Pope Leo XIV, newly consecrated. And one of the first things he said was that AI for ethical use is a good thing and that we should investigate more of this and maybe apply it more broadly. First thing that comes to mind, of course, and me, a former altar boy, I'm like, well, that priest shortage might be a lot less if everybody just used AI. So who knows? Maybe we'll have an AI sermon and a delivery, and I don't know, maybe you go to confessional and does it count if you confess your sins to an AI? I don't know. But John, what's your take on what's going on here? Will this become the new norm in other religions as well?
I can't speak for other religions, but I think in terms of the Catholic Church, this has been discussed. It's been a topic. It's been gaining traction the last couple of years. I remember doing a story here for Digital CXO when the late Pope Francis talked about the same type of framework. He said that while technology contained the potential to serve humanity, it must be used ethically. And he talked specifically about how the inherent risks of AI and other things must be mitigated. I also remember, I believe it was in 2024, he addressed a G7 session in Italy on the subject. And he followed up with a speech at the Vatican on something called generative artificial intelligence and technocratic paradigm. There was also a study done between the church and Santa Clara University. I want to say it's a couple of years ago, in which they came out with a pamphlet and talking points about the technology. So they are taking it seriously to a certain extent. And I think it's kind of a continuation. What Leo is doing is a continuation with what Francis did in terms of kind of talking about things that are not these age-old institutions. I mean, they're talking about current events, whether it is technology or whether it's political or cultural, and they're kind of entering the current world versus the kind of old staid approach. So I think it's encouraging, and perhaps maybe other religions will follow suit. Who knows? But there's a continuation of what Francis had started and kind of kickstarted the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm. And Is this just another form of AI therapy? We've seen that kind of evolve over the last couple of years, and it's being more widely used. And you could argue that religion is a spiritual experience, and much like therapy can be. So is this kind of on the same continuum?
Yes, I would say to some degree. I think that, this is a new pope. He's trying to relate to people. He's letting us know who he is. I actually recently had a friend confide in me that she had been using ChatGPT for therapy because she said it didn't feel like it judged her. Also, FYI, she's Catholic. So, coincidence? I don't know. I told her, you can tell me anything. You don't have to rely on ChatGPT. We're old friends. But anyway, so I do agree that this is just, maybe he sees it as a way to uphold spiritual principles. Maybe it's a continuation. Maybe the leap of faith you take to be religious is akin to the leap of faith you take to seeing AI as a meaningful thing in your life. I don't know. For me, it's a logic-driven decision, not a faithful one. So I don't know, but I think it's just him letting us know who he is. I think that it's the church playing global discourse in a conversation. There's over, I think, 1 billion Catholics in the world. And it's a green light. It's a green light to say this is okay. And hey, go have fun with this. And maybe it can help engage people in the church in a different way. I mean, that could be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And if it helps people, why not? Why not? If there's a shortage of therapists, people can't afford them. If it makes you feel better, do it.
No.
Why not?
Robert, do I have to worry about a deep fake taking over Pope Leo the 14th here and kind of fooling everybody into doing something they shouldn't be doing?
I doubt that. Look, the real purpose, I think, of what he was talking about, his hope was to continue that conversation about ethics and AI, and how we use these new tools. Look, Catholic Church has been around for a while. They've seen quite a few ways of technology, and this is nothing new about focusing on dignity and justice. This is always a push for all religions. I do think that there is an opportunity for companies like OpenAI, which is a B Corp, which was set up to really do research and exploration of, ethics in AI. That was the hope and dream. And we're really not seeing that. There's a big rush into what we can do with AI and pushing the boundaries for this. And I'm reminded of, a line from Jurassic Park where, we were so focused on if we could do it, we didn't question whether we should. And I do believe that focusing on is, how are these models going to affect the lives of people? Are we going to start using AI to make decisions that impact people's lives? College admission, credit worthiness, those sorts of things. What about if it starts creeping into our legal system and criminal justice system? Is that going to impact sentencing and those sorts of things? We need to be very careful of these things. And I think that is what the Pope was bringing up, that there is an impact on individuals with AI if we just blindly say we were going to turn over decision-making to the model.
Yeah, I think they're trying to get ahead of what AI can do, both good and bad. I mean, I think that's what the government's trying to do too. I mean, it's the one technology where people are fully engaged. It's the one technology I've experienced or covered where everyone seems to have an opinion. And I think right now what they're trying to do is position us to think more about the repercussions of what it can do and what it can do to us.
Yeah. I mean, it could get a little out of control, right? So suddenly you're referring to an AI agent as a father, and then maybe ultimately it gets promoted to Monsignor, and before long it's a bishop and a cardinal, and it's electing the next pope. So how far do you want to go?
I do believe that's the beginning of Terminator, right? That's how it started. I don't know. It's been a while since I've seen it. I don't know.
I guess, I think they'll have to put a clause in there that says you must be an actual breathing human to elect the next pope. And I'm sure somebody will get around to amending whatever the rules are.
But I mean, don't you think that a lot of the things that are being said about AI now, like, oh, it's going to destroy your ability to think, and oh, it's going to make us dumber, weren't those same things said about the internet, about television, about radio? I mean, how far are you going to go back? These sort of naysayer comments don't really feel new to me.
It's true. People bemoan the fact that our kids can't read analog clocks, and they look at us and go, well, who cares? I got the time on my phone. So, we
hand a paper map to someone, to a Gen Zer, and see what happens.
Yeah.
Right. And is that a bad thing? Is it a bad thing that they, have tools that are faster? I don't know. Unless you're a survivalist, is it really something that's going to come to play? I don't know. I think where it concerns me is the lack of critical thinking. If we're outsourcing our thinking, do we not get dumber? I don't know. Or do we get smarter because we're not spending our time on repetitive processes? I don't know, but
I'm hoping for the latter because, at the end of the day, a lot of the rote stuff that we all do tires you out. We are humans, and I'm hoping that we're going to spend more time on the things that matter versus, I don't know.
That's
loading
That's the whole
stories
point of AI,
website.
right? The whole point of AI and AI agents is to move away from rote tasks and be more of a critical thinker, be somebody who thinks kind of outside the box. I mean, that's the purpose. We'll see if it leads to that. I'm hopeful.
I don't think outside the box because there is no box. I don't recognize any box that limits me.
Oh, I like that. Anne rejects the concept of a box. I like it.
Wow, no box brand.
No, I am not imaginary. No imaginary constraints for me. I'm a free thinker. I will say I have hired recently, and anyone who has hired in the last 6 months is getting a flood of AI cover letters. And so I didn't require a cover letter. Okay. And so I get these cover letters, and there's all the telltale signs, M dashes, overly flowery language. Oh, here's a couple specifics sprinkled in so you think a human wrote this. And so I asked people, I said, did AI write this? And alarmingly, people denied it. And the one that didn't and said, yeah, of course I did. I thought it was a better use of my time than writing a cover letter, and I wanted to stand out. That person went to the next round because I appreciated that they were honest about it. I don't mind if you use AI if you're saving time. I just mind the deception.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I'm not quite clear exactly how all this is going to play out from a religious perspective, but I would say that the more time we have to ponder maybe the right and the wrong of things, the better humans will all be. How about that?
Amen.
All right.
Bless you, my son.
All right. And we'll be back with the next reading of the gospel in a minute.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
All right. Well, we're going to shift gears a little bit, but you could argue that what Apple has been up to is now officially a sin. But they are now determining how much cash to hand out for folks that Apple got busted for eavesdropping with Siri on folks. And they're not the only tech company that's been having this issue. But Anne, let's start with you. Are we going to see more and more of these kind of payouts for violating people's privacies? Because it seems to me that this is rampant.
Well, we're used to seeing it in the EU, right? But we're not as used to seeing it in the States. I think that someone somewhere calculated on a spreadsheet we could keep fighting this or we just pay it out. And this is chump change to them. $95 million to one of the richest companies in the world isn't really much. So they settled that class action lawsuit because Siri inadvertently recorded users' private conversations, which I think we all knew was happening. And it claimed that Siri sometimes activated unintentionally and captured sensitive discussions that were later reviewed by third parties. It was a very ominous sort of email that I got and anyone with an Apple account got yesterday. I would say that the $20 payout is probably not worth my time to go and pursue and prove. But I do think that it was interesting because the same day, news broke that they are working on a brain-computer interface. They want to control phones from their brains. I was more interested in that than the lawsuit. And then I was thinking, wow, that future lawsuit for that, the brain-computer interface is gonna just blow this out of the water. But I do think that they managed to not really cop to what happened. The language was very vague, and I think that it was just a write-off. I think it was a write-off to move on and go back to business as usual. I doubt anything will change. Apple is viewed as the white knight in this privacy battle for a lot of reasons because they've marketed as such. But this shows us that they're just like everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Robert, is it me or am I getting paranoid? But every time I turn around, I seem to feel like I'm talking about something with my wife or whoever. And then suddenly on some device, website or whatever, I'm being treated to something that is almost spot on that topic.
Well, it could be you are being spied upon, or this is confirmation bias. It could be either one. It could be both. I have no idea. I will say this: if we take 95 million and divide it by $20, this is coverage for 4.75 million devices. That's not a lot. It's this. You can do 5 devices and get $100. Okay, I think I could fill out a form for $100, and I absolutely have more than 5 Apple devices. But also 95 million for a treasure trove of data of voice. What a bargain! What a bargain! This reminds me of certainly the Google went through this where they were capturing with maps when they were getting all of the Street View data. They were capturing a bunch of Wi-Fi information, and they said, "Oops, my bad. We didn't mean to do that." But really didn't get a lot of clarity on what they did with the data afterwards. And so time and time again, people will these companies say how much, and very insightful. How much does this cost? What's the ROI on this? Oh, we're coming out ahead. Great. This is cost of doing business. And I don't see this as really much more than, okay, let's make this go away. I don't see this really significantly changing corporations' behaviors on how they do this. A lot of this stuff seems to be, it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission.
John, is anybody talking about this in the Valley? Is this a concern, or is this kind of just, it
kind of underscores two things about Apple. Well, one, as you said, it's the white. I think Ann said it's the white knight in this whole battle over privacy. Well, the dark knight is obviously Meta, but I think it brings up two things. First, there's that little $95 million, by the way, is nothing to Apple. Slap on the wrist, less than that.
Over $3 trillion they have.
Yeah, exactly, right? I mean, nothing. It's a nice investment, actually. But what it kind of brings up to me is the one story we hear about Siri and about anything AI related with Apple has got this little kind of minor negative tinge to it. At the same time, we're reading about everybody else hurtling ahead of Apple in the AI race. And I wanted to bring this up because I've talked to at least 3 people in the last couple of weeks and who used to work for Apple. They used to work within the Apple intelligence arm of things. And they all told me they resigned because mainly out of frustration in this idea that it's pretty much an aimless flawed project. I think even Warren Buffett has mentioned his misgivings about innovation in Apple at this current state. And I think it just kind of, it's to me and to people out here, it's kind of a reminder of Apple kind of fumbling its way around AI so far. I mean, I'm not saying they're going to fail, but there is a genuine concern, especially among the ex-employees who just left, with throwing their hands up.
I would tell you what I would like to see, though, is instead of you sending me an email that says I qualify for $20, can I just check a box that says that give my $20 to some charity somewhere that we can all set up? Because 95 million to a particular charity could make a big difference. Is that legal? Feasible? Or
Good question.
Sure. People could set up a GoFundMe and then give 10% of that to GoFundMe, but which is why I don't like those.
So and what happens to the 95 million if only 30% of the people actually go bother to claim their 20 to $100 or whatever it is?
I don't know that it's all going to get claimed because it's a little tedious for $20, right? I'm not going to do it, you know.
So does
I'm
all
a primer, yeah.
It will, they're off that top of the settlement amount for the attorneys that did the class action. They're going to get their fee that's been negotiated, and the rest of the money goes through a clearinghouse. If it is not accepted at a certain point, it is returned to Apple.
Wow. So
maybe we should do it just to.
How much are we betting that this 95 million actually shows up in the people who were allegedly victimized? Maybe 10%.
Right.
Look, I'm going to do it for $100. I mean, and it's going to take me 5 minutes.
I would forgo all of the money and just to know what the third party was that got it and what did they do with it. That's more interesting to me than $20. I want to know where it went because it's very ominous in the language. It just says a mystery third party.
Well, that's not the deal. And if you want to find out, don't take the payout and hire a lawyer.
Oh my God.
Well, we see these kinds of arrangements all the time, right? So maybe, I don't know, can I create an AI agent someday that will manage all my claims that I'm allegedly qualified for? And, I add them all up, $20, it turns into real money over time. So maybe there's a way to manage this so that it's not so tedious and you can have the AI agent direct that money to whatever charity you want. Let's do that.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that the legal industry is one where AI stands to disrupt quite heavily. You've got a lot of old case law to go through. And you've seen cases already where people are getting busted making court decisions and writing legal briefs using AI. And I think that's only going to continue.
Well, ultimately, we could have probably come to the conclusion that 95 million was the number to settle for if we just used a little AI about last year, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it sounds good in theory, but then I think, okay, 5 years ago, blockchain was going to replace lawyers too. Remember that? We were going to use contracts on the blockchain and buy houses and cars. And
yeah.
Where's that going?
I think we'll just file more complex court cases and the routine stuff will be handled by an AI, hopefully. And maybe we can clear up some of those backlogs in court cases that are clogging up the legal system. So, theoretically it could work. And this would just be yet another example of a case that could probably be litigated in an hour rather than taking how many years to settle this thing? It's a little crazy. All right. John, what's your prediction here? Is this a one-off or are we going to see more of these suits?
We'll see more of these probably. But, if they continue at this rate, 95 million is well worth the investment to kind of, collect data. It's well worth it.
Mm-hmm. And Robert, do I need some sort of way to track what people are doing with my data if they get it, no matter how, whether it's illegally or legally? But it seems like we don't know where our data goes.
You're right. We don't. And that is going to be a challenge. There are certainly a large number of companies that are looking at how people can protect their data and their privacy. And companies are certainly looking at how they develop their privacy policies and how they manage that. You're going to see an increase in consumers being concerned about it. So whether that is hardware manufacturers creating devices that are secure and hold data close to you and on the edge, perhaps, but you are going to see more and more people, especially educated, more advanced users like the people that are watching this and that are speaking here are going to be interested in this. However, I don't think that there is a big backlash amongst general population on this stuff. You just simply look at the rise of social media and remember, kids, when the product is free, you are the product. Mm-hmm. And so people have been giving away their data for years. So there is a large population that doesn't care. There is a growing and significant population that does care. So I do think that you're going to see people that are concerned about it. Look, everybody should be concerned about data privacy and their data, but I don't think everybody is.
Mm. So let me ask one more obscure question, but John, if I go to confession and I'm using an AI priest, is that AI priest sworn to secrecy like a regular priest, or can they be called to testify?
It's going to share its data with a third party that's unknown. I'm being facetious. So. I have no idea. I mean, the whole problem is Robert was pointing out, and that's something that Facebook, we always leaned into. This you are the product, and I think there is a tacit trade-off for most people. Most people are willing to accept that. So they're willing to accept the risk, the broad audience, and there are going to be those who will not. But for the most part, the vast majority of people are willing to take that risk, and it'll happen.
Right. I think people generally that I've spoken to about it are like, "Well, I'm not doing anything wrong. What do I care?" And apathy is really the enemy here. But I'm less interested in what Apple's doing with Siri data, which, by the way, I assumed they were doing. Than I am with the FTC case and the DOJ plan for Google, the antitrust case. I've been following that very closely. And yesterday, the FTC came out backing the DOJ to force Google to share search data with competitors. I mean, whoa, that data, your search data, that getting let loose to other companies is like a way bigger ramification to me than like whatever weird things we've all said to Siri.
Robert, I'm thinking the next big thing in home real estate is going to be soundproof rooms where you can go in there and you're.
Absolutely. Faraday cages for private conversations. Remember we had the conversation nooks in the 70s, the sunken living rooms. We're going to have Faraday cages now in our houses. For the really hip people have those. I mean, I am concerned about Google sharing my search history and that getting out because I am a terrible software engineer. And the questions that I have asked Google on how to solve very simple and easy and chuckle-headed problems, I'd be so embarrassed if that got out and everybody realized what a horrible software engineer I am.
I mean, and what about all of us that go to Dr. Google?
I'm not worried about that. I'm just my pride about like,
right,
dude,
I get it.
You had to Google that, you idiot. That's what I'm worried about.
I mean, if all that gets released, I think we're all in for some embarrassment. I don't think you're alone in that.
Well, according to Dr. Google, I should have died 3 times in the last 5 years. So I'm not so clear that that's really something to lean on too hard. But fortunately, we have AI search now, right? So you just kind of plug it in and nobody will know exactly what you're looking for anyway, because the AI will know what you're looking for. And so you can just get all that code that you're supposed to know how to run for free. Are we going to use search? I don't think so. I think we're just going to talk to our machines and then the AI will tell us what we want to know. The problem is it'll never forget what you ask, right? All right, folks, we're going to leave it here. Thanks for watching, everybody. I want to thank our guests for sharing their knowledge and insights. As always, we're going to have an awesome lineup of Techstrong TV coming up right after this, and we'll see you guys next time.